French onion soup. It feels like Paris. Stone crocs. Melted Gruyere. Dark, glossy broth that took hours to build. A dish that belongs to bistros, to candlelight, to a culinary tradition stretching back centuries. Except the version most Americans actually make, and have been making since the 1950s, doesn't come from Paris. It comes from a packet. A small, gold foil packet. Printed with the Lipton name. Containing dehydrated onion flakes, salt, cornstarch, monosodium glutamate, and a handful of flavor compounds that collectively produce something that tastes, remarkably, like onion soup. Lipton didn't invent French onion soup. The dish has genuine French origins. But the version that embedded itself into American home cooking, the one that became a holiday staple, a party dip base, a casserole ingredient, a pot roast shortcut, that version was invented in the United States by a soup mix company, in a moment of improvisation that was then systematically amplified into one of the most successful accidental product applications in American food history. But the real story isn't just the soup. It's the dip. The onion dip that came from the soup packet. The one that appeared at every party in America from 1954 onward. The one that required exactly 2 ingredients, took 30 seconds to make, and sold hundreds of millions of Lipton soup mix packets for 7 decades. An accident became a product. A product became a tradition. A tradition became a market. And Lipton collected the revenue from all 3. Before Lipton enters this story, understand what French onion soup actually is, and why it's difficult. The dish traces to 18th century France, possibly earlier. The foundational version, popularized in Les Halles, the central market district of Paris, was a working-class dish. Cheap ingredients: onions, butter, bread, and whatever broth was available. It was food for market workers finishing overnight shifts in the early morning cold. But the cooking process is unforgiving. The defining element of French onion soup is caramelized onions. Not sautéed. Not softened. Caramelized, reduced over low heat for 45 minutes to an hour until the natural sugars undergo the Maillard reaction and caramelization simultaneously. Here is the chemistry. Onions are approximately 5% sugar by weight, primarily fructose and glucose. When heated slowly, these sugars begin to break down. At around 160 degrees Celsius, the Maillard reaction initiates. Amino acids and reducing sugars react to form hundreds of new flavor compounds, including pyrazines, furans, and thiophene that produce the characteristic deep, savory, slightly sweet aroma of browned onions. Simultaneously, at slightly lower temperatures, the fructose undergoes caramelization, a separate thermal decomposition that produces caramel flavor compounds and the dark brown color. The process cannot be rushed. High heat produces burnt onions, not caramelized ones. The transformation requires sustained low heat and patience. Most recipes that claim 45 minutes actually require closer to an hour and 15. The resulting broth, built from that caramelized base, fortified with beef stock and wine, finished with a crouton and melted Gruyere under a broiler, is one of the most technically demanding simple dishes in French cuisine. Lipton's packet short-circuited every single step of that process. Thomas Lipton built his fortune in tea. By the time the Lipton brand entered American dry soup mix production in the 1930s and 1940s, the company was already a household name with distribution infrastructure that most food companies couldn't approach. The dry soup mix category existed before Lipton, but it was Lipton's marketing capability and distribution network that turned it into a mainstream category. The technology behind dry onion soup mix is dehydration. Onions are sliced and dried at controlled temperatures, low enough to prevent the Maillard reaction that would change their flavor, high enough to drive off water rapidly. The result is a dehydrated onion flake that retains much of the raw onion's volatile sulfur compound profile, the allyl sulfides and thiopropanol compounds responsible for onion's characteristic sharp, pungent flavor. When rehydrated in hot water, these compounds reconstitute partially, not identically to fresh onion, but close enough for a consumer who has never spent an hour making French onion soup from scratch to find the results satisfying. The other components of the packet perform specific functions. Cornstarch thickens the broth. Salt and MSG amplify the savory perception. MSG binds to glutamate receptors on the tongue and enhances the umami quality of the dehydrated onion and beef flavoring compounds. Caramel color provides visual depth. Beef extract contributes a meaty base note. What the packet produces is not French onion soup. It is a simulation of French onion soup's flavor profile, assembled from shelf-stable components, requiring only boiling water and 10 minutes. For a post-war American household in 1952, that was not a compromise. It was a revelation. California. A home cook, her name was never definitively recorded, though the event has been reconstructed through trade press accounts, is preparing food for a party. She has Lipton onion soup mix in her pantry. She has sour cream in her refrigerator. She combines them. The result is a cold, creamy dip with a deep savory onion flavor that requires no cooking, no preparation time, and nothing more than a spoon to make. She serves it. Her guests ask for the recipe. Word spreads. The combination appears in a Los Angeles newspaper, then in other newspapers. Then it lands in front of Lipton's marketing team. They recognize immediately what they have. This is the critical corporate moment. The dip was not Lipton's invention. They didn't develop it, test it, or conceive it. A consumer created it spontaneously from their product. But what Lipton did next transformed an accidental use case into a product category. They printed the dip recipe on the side of the soup mix packet. That single decision is one of the most consequential acts of food marketing in the 20th century. By putting the recipe on the packaging, Lipton converted every soup mix purchase into a potential dip-making occasion. They created a second use case for their product, one that required no additional investment in product development, no reformulation, no new SKU. The same packet. A new purpose. And that new purpose drove sales at a rate that soup consumption alone never had. Understanding why the dip worked requires understanding the social context of post-war America. The 1950s produced a specific consumer anxiety, the obligation to entertain. Suburban housing developments, expanded household incomes, and the cultural emphasis on domestic hospitality created a situation where middle-class American households were expected to host cocktail parties, neighborhood gatherings, holiday events, with increasing frequency. Entertaining required food. Food required preparation. Preparation required time and skill that many households, particularly those where the primary home cook also worked or managed young children, did not have in abundance. The California dip, which Lipton officially branded and promoted under variations of that name, addressed this anxiety directly. It required 2 ingredients and 30 seconds. It could be made the night before and refrigerated. It presented well on a table. It tasted good enough to generate compliments. Lipton's marketing leaned into this utility without apology. Their advertising positioned the dip not as a shortcut but as a solution. A smart choice for the modern hostess. Something that freed her time for other aspects of entertaining rather than spending it in the kitchen. The sour cream industry benefited proportionally. Every Lipton dip occasion required a container of sour cream. The two products became commercially linked, a forced pairing similar to Campbell's soup and French's onions in the green bean casserole system. By 1958, Lipton's dry onion soup mix was the best-selling dry soup product in the United States. Not because Americans were making onion soup. Because they were making dip. Lipton had discovered something broader than a dip recipe. They had discovered that their dry onion soup mix functioned as a universal seasoning base. The packet's flavor profile, savory, salty, umami-forward, with a deep onion character, enhanced almost any savory dish to which it was added. Home cooks across America began experimenting. Pot roast made with Lipton onion soup mix and water, sealed in foil and slow roasted, became one of the most widely shared recipes in American home cooking during the 1960s. The dehydrated onion and MSG-amplified beef base created a concentrated braising liquid that produced results comparable to a long-simmered braise with a fraction of the active preparation time. Meatloaf mixed with a packet of Lipton onion soup. Chicken baked in onion soup mix and cream of mushroom soup. Rice pilaf built on a soup mix broth base. None of these applications appeared in Lipton's original product brief. All of them appeared on Lipton's packaging within a decade. Because Lipton was watching what consumers were doing with their product, and then formalizing those uses as official recipe endorsements. This is the recipe as advertising strategy that Campbell's had pioneered, but applied in reverse. Campbell's created recipes to sell soup. Lipton discovered that consumers were creating recipes and then promoted those discoveries to sell more soup mix packets. The consumer was the R&D department. Lipton was the distribution system. By the 1970s, Lipton dry onion soup mix had achieved something structurally similar to what Heinz had accomplished with ketchup and Campbell's had accomplished with cream of mushroom soup. It had become a pantry default. American households stocked it not for a specific planned dish but because it was generally useful. A packet in the back of the cabinet. Available whenever you needed a flavor base quickly. This pantry default status is the most durable commercial position a food product can achieve. It generates purchases based not on desire for a specific dish but on the anxiety of not having it available when needed. Lipton extended the franchise deliberately. Onion mushroom soup mix. Beefy onion soup mix. Vegetable soup mix. Each extension broadened the pantry presence of the Lipton seasoning franchise without competing against the original product. The California dip recipe, which Lipton had promoted for decades, was eventually joined by other dip variants printed on packaging. Herb dip, vegetable dip, spinach dip. Each drove sour cream purchases. Each reinforced the soup mix's identity as a party essential. By the time Unilever acquired the Lipton brand, the dry soup mix business represented one of the most stable recurring revenue streams in the American grocery category, not because of innovation, not because of superior flavor, but because decades of recipe promotion had embedded the product into behavioral occasions that repeated annually. Holiday hosting. Summer barbecues. Football parties. Every occasion that required a dip had a Lipton packet at its center. That recurrence was not accidental. It was the product of a single marketing decision made in 1954 to print a consumer's recipe on the side of a box. French onion soup is a real dish. The caramelized onions are real chemistry. The Gruyere is real. The bistro tradition is real. But the version of French onion soup that most Americans have actually tasted, the one that came from a pot at a family dinner, built from a Lipton packet and water in 20 minutes, has almost nothing in common with what is served in a Parisian cafe. And the dish that actually drove Lipton's dominance wasn't soup at all. It was a dip. An accident. Made by an unnamed home cook in California who combined two pantry items out of necessity and inadvertently created one of the most commercially significant product applications in American food history. Lipton didn't invent it. They printed it on a box. And that single act of corporate opportunism, converting a consumer discovery into a branded recipe, generated 7 decades of repeat purchases from an audience that believed they were making something clever and original every time they combined a packet with a container of sour cream. The soup was the product. The dip was the strategy. And the tradition, the expectation that a party without onion dip was incomplete, was the revenue stream. Every time you set out a bowl of onion dip at a gathering, you were perpetuating a marketing decision made 70 years ago by a tea company that needed to move soup mix packets. The dish on your table is real. The hunger it satisfies is real. The tradition it feels like is not. That tradition was printed on the side of a box in 1954. Let us know in the comments what we should cover next. Thanks for watching.